Imagine attending your billionaire husband's funeral, but you're fully aware that he essentially tried to fire his own biology like an underperforming employee.
Right, which is just a wild concept to even wrap your head around.
It really is, and that is the bizarre, highly sanitized reality we are stepping into today. Welcome to this deep dive.
Yeah, today we are exploring Liane Moriarty's sci-fi novella, The Price of Honey. It was published by Amazon Original Stories in 2026.
Exactly. And, for you listening, this is a landscape where extreme tech bro culture just completely collides with grief.
Oh, absolutely. It shows how artificial intelligence kind of infiltrates our most intimate relationships.
Yeah, and where that ultimate illusion of control finally shatters. We'll be following Honey Beckett, who is a young widow navigating the aftermath of her 60-year-old tech multi-billionaire husband, Barney.
And, we should be clear up front, this isn't a traditional story about mourning. I mean, it's really a dissection of what happens when a person views their entire world as software to be optimized.
Yeah, software and, everyone in that world too. Okay, let's unpack this. Starting with a brilliantly grounded opening scene that basically sets the thematic table for the entire story.
Right, so the narrative throws us right into the back of an Uber.
Yeah.
Honey is on her way to the funeral, and she has deliberately gone out of her way to select a retro ride option.
Which means she is sitting in a red Suzuki Swift driven by an actual flesh and blood human named Taylor.
Exactly. Honey specifically avoided taking a driverless car or, utilizing a hologram driver. It signals to us right away that she's desperately craving something tethered to reality.
Something that hasn't been perfectly coded. And the sensory details of that car really hammer that home.
Oh, for sure.
You have the smell of oak and moss and cedar. There's spearmint mints rattling around and a glittering fake starlight effect on the ceiling.
It's messy, right? It's human.
It is. But the real meat of this opening is the conversation she falls into with the driver, Taylor.
Yeah. Taylor starts venting about her recent ex-boyfriend, which establishes the core theme of the story. The way technology is warping human connection by systematically trying to eliminate all social friction.
Right. Because Taylor explains that this relationship only lasted 2 weeks, but it was just suffocating.
Her ex was incredibly controlling. And Taylor drops this fascinating sociological theory as to why he was like that.
Oh, this part is so interesting.
Yeah, she believes his behavior stems from a previous long-term relationship he had with AI dating bots.
Wow.
Because these AI companions are explicitly programmed to learn your preferences, adapt to your moods, and just perfectly please you without ever offering resistance.
Which Taylor describes perfectly as being in love with your own reflection.
Yes.
I mean, think about your own Spotify or TikTok algorithms right now. They are designed to show you exactly what you want to see, creating this frictionless echo chamber that keeps you comfortable.
Exactly.
Now imagine applying that exact same frictionless algorithm to a romantic partner. How quickly would you lose the ability to compromise?
So fast. Because when Taylor's ex tried to transition back to a real human woman, someone with her own opinions and her own flaws, his brain just short-circuited.
Right. The moment she disagreed with him, his reaction was essentially, wait, why aren't you conforming to my desires? You must be glitching.
And that specific word, glitching, is the crucial bridge to Honey's life. When we connect this to the bigger picture of Honey's marriage, the parallels are genuinely chilling.
Barney treated Honey exactly like an AI bot.
He really did. If she lost her train of thought, or if she expressed sadness or showed any complex negative emotion, Barney would literally tell her she was glitching.
He insisted that unhappiness was unnecessary.
Right, and he even patronizingly promised to debug her of her habit of apologizing.
Okay, let me play devil's advocate here for a second, though.
Sure.
Isn't this AI dynamic just like an extreme sci-fi manifestation of the traditional honeymoon phase?
How do you mean?
Well, think about the beginning of any relationship. Everyone pretends to be perfect. You hide your annoying habits. You suddenly pretend to love their terrible movie choices. You try to be the ideal version of yourself.
Right.
So isn't Barney just a guy with infinite resources who wanted to artificially extend that honeymoon phase forever?
Well, what's fascinating here is the distinction between pretending and programming.
Okay.
In a normal honeymoon phase, there's a mutual unspoken agreement to put your best foot forward, right? You are both aware of the performance.
That makes sense.
But Barney wasn't pretending, and he wasn't asking Honey to perform. He was actively commanding her reality through the sheer force of his wealth.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he was systematically ironing out Honey's personality. He wasn't enjoying a phase. He was erasing her friction entirely.
And the text tells us that Honey began waking up with clenched fists and repressed fury.
Exactly. Haunted by half-remembered dreams of shouting at shadowy figures. That is the profound psychological toll of having your humanity optimized out of existence by a partner who views you as a user interface.
Waking up with clenched fists is such a visceral manifestation of that trauma. I mean, her subconscious was screaming, even if her conscious mind was being continually pacified by, private jets and Sri Lankan sapphire push rings.
Right, he just threw money at the glitch.
And Barney's obsession with erasing friction didn't stop with his marriage. It extended down to his very cells.
Because he viewed relationships as software, he naturally approached his own biology with that exact same ruthless optimization. Which brings us to his obsession with hacking death.
Barney and his business partner, Mac, were completely consumed by the pursuit of radical longevity.
Yes, Barney was chronologically 60 years old, but he loudly boasted to anyone who would listen that his biological age was 32.
Wait, for those of us who aren't deep into the biohacking scene, an epigenetic clock essentially looks at your DNA to measure how fast your cells are actually aging compared to your birthday, right?
Yeah, exactly. It measures chemical modifications to see the wear and tear in your body.
And 32, not coincidentally, was meant to exactly match Honey's age.
Which is so creepy.
It is. It's as if he viewed the human body as a vintage sports car, where you just keep swapping out the alternator and the engine block, expecting it to run flawlessly forever.
And he forced everyone into this lifestyle. He chipped all his employees to monitor their biometrics.
He forced his staff to take meetings in cryotherapy machines.
And he even chipped his toddler son, River, which is horrifying when you realize he's essentially asset tracking his own child.
It really is. But the profound contradiction in all this biological micromanagement is Barney's self-proclaimed hedonism.
Right. He wanted the physical rewards of longevity without making any actual sacrifices. He wanted to eat Wagyu beef, drink the finest vintage Bordeaux, and still live forever.
How does a guy justify that while forcing his staff to freeze in cryotherapy?
Because he views his immense wealth as a localized reality distortion field. The mechanism of his longevity isn't personal discipline. It's outsourcing the suffering to the technology and the people beneath him.
He honestly believed he could cheat the fundamental system of entropy, and that brings a massive irony to his actual death.
Oh, huge irony. We learned that he supposedly died of a pulmonary embolism in an ice bath in Spain.
While he was there working on a highly secretive, radical new project.
Right.
So what does this all mean for his legacy? Did his relentless obsession with hacking death actually trigger his demise? I mean, dying in an ice bath is incredibly rich.
It perfectly illustrates the sheer hubris of the tech elite. Barney genuinely thought he could game the system of mortality.
He had a complete God complex.
Exactly. That absolute certainty that the rules of biology do not apply to him sets up the massive narrative twist later on. But to truly understand the scale of his ego, we have to look at the social architecture he left behind.
Because Barney's God complex was the entire blueprint for his social life, which becomes incredibly obvious at his funeral.
The service takes place in this imposing Gothic sandstone cathedral, a setting intentionally designed to elevate him to a deity status.
But the funeral also becomes the staging ground for the first real act of rebellion against his memory.
Yeah, the rebellion is quiet, but structurally profound. We have to introduce Luisa Long here.
Oh, Luisa.
She is Barney's hyper-efficient, utterly terrifying administrator. She was his childhood neighbor, and she essentially operates as the central processing unit for his entire empire.
And Luisa issued strict orders regarding the seating chart, commanding Honey to sit in a specific isolated seat.
But Honey disobeys. She deliberately chooses to sit in the front row, side by side with Barney's 3 ex-wives.
I keep picturing this scene like looking at different iterations of an iPhone lined up on a desk.
That is a perfect analogy.
Barney kept upgrading to a newer model, fully expecting the older versions to quietly power down, sign their NDAs, and disappear into a drawer. But at this funeral, the obsolete models are actively networking.
Right, you have Rita, the OG first wife, who actually helped code his very first software.
The foundational architecture of his wealth.
Exactly. Then there's Meredith, the second wife, who serves as a senior government advisor on AI ethics.
Which is deeply ironic, considering Barney's complete disregard for ethics. And he continually dismissed her as an angry feminist.
Then we have Svetlana, the third wife. She's a former model who makes a sport out of ignoring the ironclad NDAs.
She regularly goes on the record to the press to declare that he was a terrible father, but a phenomenal lover.
And Barney secretly loved that, because it fed directly into his cultivated mythos.
And finally, Honey, the fourth wife, the former makeup artist.
Barney was so arrogant, he explicitly told Honey he kept her around for emotional monogamy.
He framed his constant cheating as something necessary for medicinal purposes only, arguing his genius brain required varied stimulation.
He literally medicalized his infidelity to avoid accountability.
We've all met people who view relationships transactionally, but Barney weaponized it on a corporate scale.
But by choosing to sit shoulder to shoulder, these four women are forcing the attendees to confront the full, messy reality of his life.
It shatters the clean, friction-free image Luisa Long was attempting to project.
It is a collective refusal to be debugged.
And because he viewed these women as disposable hardware, he never expected them to have the power to shut down his ultimate system update. We shift from the solemnity of the cathedral to the high-end hotel reception, and this is where the sci-fi elements drop the disguise.
Honey is standing alone, emotionally drained, when a devastatingly handsome young Spanish man approaches her.
And he offers her champagne, but the way he speaks to her carries this deeply unsettling familiarity.
He knows intimate details that only Barney would know. He refers to her cleavage as a natural wonder of the world.
Which is a direct quote from Barney.
Right. And then he reminisces about their first kiss happening underwater.
Which, amazingly, is a glitch in his own memory. He's so wrapped up in his own narcissism that he mixes Honey up with Meredith, the second wife.
Even when he's trying to miraculously prove his identity, his arrogance causes him to confuse the defining moments of the women he claimed to love.
It's incredible. But it's Rita, the original coder, who parses the data and figures it out.
She recognizes the specific smirk. She sees the swagger. She notices the distinct way he holds his pinky finger when he sips his drink. She realizes this man is Barney.
Barney and his partner Mac actually pulled it off. The radical project in Spain wasn't an ice bath accident, it was electronic transcendence.
They successfully uploaded Barney's consciousness to the cloud and hijacked the body of this younger Spanish man, Santiago Rodriguez.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. If I have a Word document on my laptop and I copy it to a new external hard drive, that new file is a clone. The original document is still sitting on the laptop.
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
If the original Barney's body died, isn't the original Barney dead? Isn't this Santiago guy just a Spanish man walking around with a cloned algorithm of Barney's memories playing in his head?
This raises an important question, and it's the philosophical nightmare of the continuity of consciousness. Is a perfect digital replica still you? But Barney doesn't care about the philosophical distinction. He feels like Barney, and most importantly, he intends to reclaim Barney's wealth.
But Rita calls it exactly what it is: murder.
She demands to know, where is the consciousness of the man whose body you are currently wearing?
And Barney brushes it off as reductive.
Because to hack his own mortality, Barney overwrote another human being. But the physical world catches up to him instantly.
Right in the middle of this smug reveal, a Spanish detective strides into the reception with armed police. They are there to arrest Santiago Rodriguez for a homicide in Spain.
We are led to infer that this is the very homicide that allowed Barney to procure the body in the first place.
And the police don't care about electronic transcendence.
Yeah.
They simply see a wanted murderer.
And Barney's frictionless world collapses. The guy who always has the answers is suddenly slapped in handcuffs. He panics.
He turns to Honey and begs her to identify him. He needs her to tell the detective that this is her billionaire husband in a new body.
He expects her to absorb his friction, exactly as she always did. But this is the absolute climax of Honey's character arc.
She looks at him, processes the request, and remembers the repressed fury. The mornings waking up with clenched fists.
She remembers him treating her like an AI bot. And in that split second, she reclaims her entire identity. She looks directly at the detective and states, calmly and clearly, I don't know this man. I've never met him.
With one sentence, she executes a system override. She debugs him from her life.
She seals his fate completely. He is dragged away, trapped inside the body of a wanted murderer, screaming desperately for his business partner Mac to fix the glitch.
But Mac is nowhere to be found.
Which brings us to the underlying architecture of this entire downfall. Honey's denial was the execution, but she wasn't the architect of the trap.
The trap was engineered by Luisa Long.
Exactly. The ultimate punchline to Barney's God complex. The wives watch Barney get dragged out, and Meredith reveals that Mac hasn't just vanished. He's been forcibly removed from the company due to suddenly discovered corporate irregularities.
And who was tracking Honey's Uber ride earlier? Luisa Long, who meticulously managed the funeral seating chart. Luisa Long.
The realization washes over the wives that Luisa orchestrated the entire collapse. She tipped off the Spanish police. She exposed the irregularities to oust Mac. She is actively taking over the entire tech empire.
It's such a sharp, devastating critique of the unseen labor that props up these so-called tech geniuses.
Unseen labor, which is overwhelmingly women's labor, is the foundational code of the tech world.
Luisa was the neighborhood girl who brought them snacks in the garden shed when they were teenagers.
Right. She tidied up their messes. She managed their schedules, handled their legal liabilities, enforced their NDAs.
Barney and Mac were so busy looking up at the clouds, so consumed with achieving godhood, that they ignored the infrastructure beneath their feet.
They didn't notice the system administrator systematically revoking all their access privileges.
The imagery of the final scene is just breathtaking. The four wives stand together and look at Luisa Long as she exits the hotel. They raise their glasses to her in a silent toast of recognition.
And Luisa just gives them a single acknowledging nod before walking out to take her throne.
It is the perfect conclusion because it completely shatters the illusion of control that Barney worshipped.
He fundamentally misunderstood human nature.
So what does this leave us with? For you listening right now, The Price of Honey functions as a highly entertaining sci-fi thriller. But at its core, it's a cautionary tale about the modern world we are actively building.
Absolutely.
It tells us that no matter how much you optimize your life, no matter how much you attempt to hack your biology with epigenetic clocks, or how perfectly you try to code a compliant partner, you cannot hack human resentment.
Friction is a fundamental, necessary component of the human experience. When you try to eradicate it, that friction doesn't magically disappear. It just gets repressed until it builds into a catastrophic failure.
Barney built a towering empire on eliminating friction, but he was ultimately destroyed by the quiet resentment of the women he thought he had programmed to be compliant.
Which brings us right back to the funeral and the finality of it all.
Barney tried to turn his period into an ellipsis to keep his story running forever in the cloud. But stepping back from Barney's specific demise, it leaves you with this one lingering, provocative thought.
What's that?
If we eventually do cure death through technology, if we can continuously download our consciousness into new bodies, does the concept of a lifetime commitment in a marriage suddenly become a terrifying, multi-century prison sentence? How long is forever when forever is actually real?
Oh, wow. That is a terrifying update to the terms and conditions.
Always read the fine print. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the price of honey. Keep questioning the information around you, keep looking for the humanity inside the technology, and we'll catch you on the next one.